Welcome to Stirring Strength, Perspectives on Mental Health and Addiction. My name is Dean Anderson, and on today's show, we have Pastor Jeremy Males. Hi, Jeremy.
Hey, Dean, how are you?
I'm well, thanks.
Excellent.
I appreciate you being here.
Glad to do it.
I'm excited. This is a topic that I think is under-talked about and requires more exploration in the general sense of what it means. And then you reached out to me to say, I'd like to have a talk about it. I was like, right on, let's do it. I think it's critical. So what we're talking about today is we're talking about kind of spirituality and some of the work that you do as a pastor and the role that it plays into mental health and addiction. Because right now we know that sometimes there's a bad name or there's a wedge behind it or some stigma or judgment behind that as well, same as the addiction and mental health. So that makes it quite difficult. So first question I would like to ask you, what does the title pastor mean?
I think most basically, pastor is really about shepherding people, right? And if you think of the role of a shepherd, the shepherd cares for the sheep. The shepherd has the sheep's best interests in mind. And so I look at the job of pastoring as shepherding people. I think the picture that I really like to use, even more so than that, is the idea that I'm journeying with someone. So I'm walking alongside them. I'm not walking behind. I'm not walking ahead. It's kind of, linked arms, just being with them. So it's chaplaincy. I do pastoral at like a pastor church, and I do some chaplaincy as well. And the idea in pastoral and chaplaincy ministry is this idea of ministry of presence, like being with people, good, the bad, the ugly, and just journeying with them, knowing that we can support them in their journey, wherever they're at, whatever they believe, whoever they think they are or want to be or have been, it doesn't really matter. We're there to be with them and work with them, love them through the journey.
Okay. So chaplaincy and the difference between that. So you bring that word in and pastor, and I think it's so part of this conversation that we're having is so that the person sitting at home says, no, I didn't know what that was about or what that meant. So we're kind of opening up the door to that. So what's the difference between chaplaincy and? So
generally when people think of pastors, they think of ministers, priests, that type of thing.
Okay.
And that would be more times than not more in a church type of role. However, as a chaplain, you will have heard things like, there'll be a chaplain for the military or a chaplain for the police or a chaplain in a hospital. So chaplains are essentially pastors that have maybe a different type of flock or community than, more of the church type of situation, if that makes any sense.
Okay. So then it's a spiritual role within a different or separate organization, but then having a spiritual pastoral role in that. So chaplain. Okay, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. So the role that it plays in general, the spiritual piece. So question being, we're talking about spirituality, but there's also some confusion between that and Christianity, and we're looking at the, understanding what is spiritual today, correct?
So I would say that I am first and foremost a Christian, and I'm unapologetically Christian, but I'm not dogmatically Christian, because, we all know that, and I use this when I'm talking with clients in addiction and, mental health type of thing. I say, I'm not going to be the type of person that does would you like to become a Christian now or speak to Jesus personally about it? Because that's coercion. Coercion never works. And as much as I'd love people to, accept the Christian faith, my job is not to make them choose that. My job isn't even convince them to make that choice. My job is to be with them in the midst of their struggles, help them to explore the sacred or the divine. And sometimes they're going to choose something else. Oftentimes they do choose something else. I'm not worried about that. My experience has been, and I think you probably have seen this as well, is that when people engage in spirituality as part of their recovery, whether, mental health issues and challenges or, recovery from substance abuse and alcohol and so on and so forth, those who buy into spirituality of some kind tend to often have better results, because I think oftentimes we forget that we're not just, mental, emotional, physical. We are spiritual as well. And, if you have a chair with that's supposed to have 4 legs and one of the legs is missing, the chair's not balanced, right? And it doesn't become a stable foundation for you to sit on. So I think bringing the spirituality piece in is huge in terms of giving people a balanced approach to recovery, whatever that means for them at that particular moment.
I'm right with you.
Yeah.
It's not just in recovery, but I think quality of life as a whole, having a sensation.
Yeah.
We'll talk about how we define spirituality in a second, but before we do, I wanted to go back and explore some of that, the Christianity piece, and I would like to help the people at home know the difference between those two things. And I know you say you're unapologetically, because that's your belief, that's your thing, right? It's not about pushing it on other people. But we also see that there's a lot of resistance and a lot of pushback to the idea that spirituality is Christianity. And then that kind of, creates a barrier for many. So what is it that you do in those situations when you're trying to be a chaplain and a pastor for individuals who are anti-Christianity or against that? How do you, deal with that?
Well, I think first and foremost, I take people where they're at. I respect their beliefs. I respect their choices. And again, it's really comes down to not being judgmental and just having real conversation. Like you notice in our world today, you can't have conversations with people without people getting offended about things. Well, I try to take a step back from this and go, okay, I'm not going to be offended by what anybody says. They can have a different opinion. They can have a different view. It doesn't mean I hate them. It doesn't mean we can't talk. And so I think that's the first thing for me is, if I'm not hostile, if I'm not trying to be coercive, if I'm simply just trying to say, hey, I want to know about you and what you believe and understand, this to be about, then I think people tend to let their guard down as well. Sure. I personally think that throughout history, there's times where Christians have been very, very coercive with the way that they've expressed their faith, and I think it's been a detriment to the way that we actually interact with people.
Sure.
Jesus says we're supposed to love people, so let's love them, and that's unconditionally, and it's to take them where they're at. That's what Jesus did. That's what my Christian upbringing and my understanding of the scriptures tell me. So that's the way I'm going to try to engage people. And I'm not worried about, what they believe or how they think what I believe. I want to act in a way that shows them there's love in me, right? I just want to love them where they're at, right?
I'm hearing humanity and compassion.
That's what Jesus was all about, right?
Yeah, that's it's key to anyone wanting to be able to feel safe enough to make a change.
Yeah.
They need to first be accepted before they can make that change, and that's pretty important. And the reason why I bring it up was not to put you on the spot, but I know that there's a lot more to. Sometimes there's even religious traumas or individuals who have been shamed and ridiculed through the process of maybe not meeting the ideas of any church, not just Christianity. We're talking about any indoctrined religious path or spirituality that can be like, hey, this is not what it is. So that leads me into, like I said, we'll talk about it in a second. What is for you the big difference between the religious constructs of any religion, not just Christianity, and then how do we define spirituality within that? Because I think that's critical for people to note that they're not the same thing. Yeah. Right.
So I remember back when I was doing my schooling, I wrote a paper about this, not knowing that I would be moving in this direction and in terms of ministry and that type of thing. But I think there's basically 3 general approaches to spirituality. The first one is formalized religions, such as Christianity, Islam, Judaism, that type of thing. And so those are formalized religions. So they have got, like a holy book that they read. They have like community practices that they're a part of. And there's a sense of cohesiveness that comes around this set of beliefs and practices and their holy book and that type of thing, right? So that would be the formalized religions piece. The second approach to spirituality or general approach would be what I call as, it's not my term. I read it in a book years ago. I think it was called Coffee Shop Conversations. And they talked about this idea of spiritual designers. And spiritual designers are people who take a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and they put together a spirituality that works for them. My experience has been oftentimes people in 12-step programs are spiritual designers.
It's almost encouraged, sorry to interrupt, it's almost encouraged in the idea of saying if you don't have a set religion, then it's your higher powers, you want it to be, and then people go, okay, I'll create some stuff then to make it work, right?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, go ahead.
No, and that's okay. And you know what, I don't think that people, as much as I would love people to take on the Christian worldview, I don't think people have to, they don't have to do anything they don't want to do. So if they want to put together a spirituality that works for them, sure, let's walk alongside you in the midst of that, right? So formalized religions, spiritual designers, and the third one I would say would be like a non-transcendent spirituality. This is for the people who don't believe in, or this is, I wouldn't say it's for the people, I would say it's the approach that's taken by people who don't have any sense of something that transcends the physical world, something, like a God figure or, something spiritual, if you will, right? Something transcendent. I think that word's easy enough to understand, I think.
Sure.
Yeah. And so their spirituality is based upon physical things. So the way that they interact with the world. Are they being people of goodness and peace and love and justice? Are they being people who take care of the environment? That type of thing. And I'm not saying that I'm 100% right on this, but so far I haven't found an approach to spirituality that doesn't fit within one of those three categories. As a pastor and a chaplain, when I'm trying to interact with people, and there's thousands of approaches, like specific approaches to spirituality, I can't possibly know them all. But when I'm trying to connect with a person and figure out where they're at, and when they're trying to explain it to me, I'm usually able to categorize it in one of those three ways, which allows me to be able to use a more specific language in trying to understand and help them on their journey. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So my understanding is spirituality is, for some, it's muddy water because it's explaining the unexplainable. It's kind of stepping into that unknown piece. So therefore, how do you explain the unexplainable? And so each person has to have a lane that they use to explain the unexplainable. Some people, even in the 12-step world, they will use the higher power of good, orderly direction.
Yes, I've heard that
which is the acronym of God, but it's like that's what it means to them. God means good, orderly direction, which is being good for the environment and doing the right thing and being, in line with their values and their beliefs and what that means. And that's still a spiritual construct of me investing in the unknown in a better way, or a way that that fits for me. So it makes perfect sense to be able to not to judge, but not to categorize, but to look at a person so you can figure out what's the best way to communicate with you based on how you know how to communicate.
Well, I think that this way, whenever two organizations come together to try to make a partnership, one of the first things they do is a memo of understanding, right? And one of the things in a memo of understanding is defining of terms. So if I want to speak the same language as someone who's exploring the sacred or the divine, I need to kind of understand what their terms mean, right? Because, like you just said, God for one person might mean good, orderly direction. God for another person may be a supreme, eternal being that operates outside of time, right?
Or a spiteful evil dude with a
exactly,
lightning bolt.
Right? So it's kind of this, like in having, for me, these three ways that I categorize, it at least gives me a framework for beginning to understand where they're at, and then we can get into deeper conversations about those things and explore ideas. And hey, does this work? Does this not work? And again, I don't think my goal is to convince them or coerce them of my worldview. My goal is I want to see you do well, and I want to be a person that's in your life that loves you and supports you in that direction, that journey of getting well.
So again, a shepherd, a guide.
Absolutely.
Kind of showing that direction. I like that you had said earlier that there's we're sitting with the people and accepting them for who they are and what that means. And you also said it's really difficult to have some conversations. And they're hard to have, and a lot of people don't want to talk about them. So when you talked about being on the show today, I'm like, there's some hard conversations that I'd like to have. Nothing expose-ish, but there's some difficulties here. I know that there has been a lot of concern with spirituality or that type, not accepting people for where they're at, for their sexual preferences, for their the way that they act, for their drug use, for the things that they do, their behaviors.
Yeah.
And sometimes they go, well, if you're in that camp, therefore you don't accept X, Y, Z. And I would like to talk more about where some of that misconception may come from, and how do we, right size it.
Okay. So some of it I don't think is misconception.
Okay.
I think
there's a reality.
I think there's a reality that, and again, I think this is one of the places that the Christian church has gone wrong.
Okay.
Right? And maybe other religious groups as well. I can't speak to other religious groups particularly. I can speak to my own experience.
You're going to talk about your own team.
Yeah, exactly. Right? So I'll talk about my own team.
Okay.
I think oftentimes Christians have been very judgmental of people where they're at.
Okay.
But if I'm trying to make an impact in their life, right? I can't convince them of anything else. Not that I'm trying to, but I can't even actually start a relationship with them if I've got this wall up to begin with. Again, the way I look at what Jesus did, Jesus took people as they were and dealt with life issues and problems along the way, but he embraced them where they were at, right? And the funny thing is, as I read the New Testament and see how Jesus functioned, he actually went after hardcore the religious elites, the people who should have known better about certain things, right? He went after them, and the people who weren't religious elites, he just embraced them, right? And so for me, I think we've made mistakes in the past where we've been very judgmental of people, and we've shut down conversation and the opportunity for relationship and to love someone through a difficult stage in their life. And so I don't think there's a misconception in that respect. However,
you're not wrong. The process of trying to create rules around spirituality by default have to exclude somebody. And I think the Dalai Lama said it, that the best definition of love is the absence of judgment. But the minute that we start creating rules on what separates people, by default, that's judgment. Right? So
and I always come back to it. My Christian opinion is they got to take it up with God at the end. It's not taking it up with me, right? And so I would rather, if it's an error, I don't think it is, but I'd rather err on the side of loving someone unconditionally and radically, on the chance that their life is going to get better, than to do the opposite and not have any opportunity with them whatsoever.
Sure.
Right.
Right. And so you were saying about continuing.
Yeah. So I think there's some misconception, but not everyone's like that, right? And again, I'm not trying to put myself on a pedestal because I'm not perfect either. But in my time of working with people, which goes back to when I was a teenager, actually, as I think about my life more, not that I haven't made mistakes, but it's always been, you know what, I would rather just try to get to know you a little bit. But that's been a journey for me too, to learn how to not be judgmental, how to not be, dogmatic. And
well, that's a never ending for all of us. We're in a constant state of understanding the difference.
I appreciate you saying
discernment or judgment. We're constantly in that. It's part of safety. Human psychology is I'm in a constant state of judgment to protect myself and or grow and learn. It's when it becomes problematic or harmful is the difference, right? If I could make it go away, then I would be Jesus too.
Right. This is it, right? So I think the realization that I have to have is I'm on as much a journey as that individual is. Someone once said to me that it's funny, and again, just take this with a grain of salt, but how dare you judge me because I sin differently than you?
No, I love that. There's a Facebook post I share once in a while that says the same thing.
Right. And again, I haven't arrived. I'm on a journey too. And when I realize that I have issues of brokenness in my life, issues where I'm not adding up in terms of the way I treat people and love people and the way I behave and so on and so forth. If I don't realize that about myself, then I am going to be judgmental, right? How much difference in situation what I've had to have in my life to be in the same situation as many of those that we're dealing with, ministering to, who have, mental health challenges, or who are in in the midst of substance abuse and such.
Right.
It wouldn't have had to be a whole lot of change in my life for me to end up in the same place, right?
Yeah. There's something to be said about that journey of the thing that leads us to the capacity of seeing the harm of judgment is usually our own suffering, is it not? It's the me going through the stuff that provides me the know-how to be like, hey, I shouldn't judge that. I shouldn't do that. So the person who's never had any adversity doesn't have the capacity to understand or know no judgment. So one can't feel. I feel as though one can't exist without the other.
I think this is what happens when we live in a broken world, right? But I think at some point some of us have been in situations where we haven't experienced a lot of adversity. We haven't experienced a lot of trouble. Maybe we grew up in a really, really good home where we didn't experience any trauma, right? Or very little trauma, or small amounts of trauma. I think once you begin to experience what some other people are experiencing, you come and you're in the trenches with those who are experiencing it. Even if you haven't been through it, I think you can begin to gain some compassion. But again, I don't think that happens by, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this, by the way, but I don't think we necessarily gain that by going out and handing some food out or some meals out and so on and so forth. You actually need to engage with people and hear their stories. And when you hear their stories, you go, oh, that is so awful. Right. I remember, Dean, and this is a quick story, in my early years of ministering to people who were homeless, she was a guy who wasn't homeless. He had been in shelter for a while and was in his own apartment. And I'd been building relationship for a long time with him. And he began to share with me stories of child abuse and sexual abuse when he was 3 years old that he remembers, right? And I had never really experienced anything like that before. I still haven't experienced anything like that, but I've experienced his story. But it was so impacting on me. I ended up having to go back and sit in my office for 40 minutes and not do anything, because I was so overwhelmed with how tragic and traumatic that must have been for his life. So yeah, not everybody's going to go through all this stuff, but when you connect with people and you hear their heart, right? And this is one of the things I talk about, this idea of we want to not just hear people's words, we want to hear their heart. We're listening for their heart, right? And that's when I think we can begin to go, wow, I'm very judgmental about this, and I need to have a different perspective.
Yeah, I think when we're talking about compassion, kind of interlinked with empathy. And when I made my comment earlier about they can't be one and the same, it's not that everybody has to have every horrible experience, but when you see another human being having disconnection or pain or suffering or hurt, we all understand that to some degree. We all understand pain, suffering, and hurt. We don't understand it to that level, but we do all understand it. And I think we're in a place in today's world where we all have our own versions of trauma based on what I have the capacity to manage. And so the trauma might be, my pants don't fit anymore. For one person, it's it's homelessness, right? It can be completely different, but it depends on what capacity you have and how we measure that. But point being is that we can't have the capacity to try and resolve judgment without having that empathy of understanding first. So that means I have to go through some suffering to be able to understand suffering. And it's so either way, or if you don't have an understanding of it, how could you possibly ever do it? So therefore, we can't be perfect.
Do you know what, actually, it brings out a very interesting point for me that I never maybe quite thought of till now. But if we have gone through something, again, maybe not the level of homelessness or addiction, but we've gone through something and we've never done any self-reflection on it, we're not going to understand our own pain enough that we can begin to understand somebody else's. Absolutely. And we live in a society that's so lacking in self-awareness, right? I think it's a big piece for me in this is that I've learned a lot of self-awareness.
I love that.
And that reflection on what I've been through, again, allows me to have compassion at another level.
And I'll share some of my own personal experience of the idea of spirituality is right in line with that. So it's the idea of saying, if I want to learn and grow, I have to be able to face myself, look at my own experiences and my own things. That's terrifying.
100%.
It's probably the most terrifying thing any person can do. Like in prison, they put people in solitary confinement. So you have to sit in your own thoughts. Right? That's the worst thing ever.
100%.
So the idea of being put into that space is scary for most. And we live in a world of distraction. Like you said, it's a constant state of drug, alcohol, TV, cell phone, whatever it is. And I'd rather go do that than do that. For me, spirituality is me trusting the unknown to feel safer so I can look at those things and know they'll kind of work out, because I don't have any certainty. When I go in, I have no idea what's going to happen when I self-reflect or have self-awareness. So I have to turn that over to something else to be like, okay, I'm going to look at this. I'm going to be okay. Hold on. And using spirituality as a tool to lean on that. So it's a safety tool, right?
Do you think it's interesting? This is the other thing I was thinking of in all this. Again, something I've never thought of before. I think it's interesting that we expect people who have gone through all sorts of trauma, who've experienced things, you need to go get help. You need to go get trauma counseling. You need to go and do all this type of stuff. And yet, oftentimes, we're not willing to do that ourselves.
Yeah, it's scary.
That's like, to me, that's kind of like the ultimate judgment right there. You know what I mean?
I do. I totally know. I think that the disconnect is the idea is if you're in crisis and it's bad enough, you should do anything that you need to do to make that happen. But part of the reason why I think people are in crisis in the first place is because they don't have the emotional fortitude or the capacity or the spiritual awareness to be able to feel safe enough to make the change. And growth and
supports either.
So that falls in the same category. So if I don't have supports, I don't feel safe. If I don't have this, I don't feel safe. If I don't have emotional, I don't feel safe. All the things that make me not feel safe. Because when we look at anyone who's growing, evolving, changing, healing, that environment is always done better in a space of feeling safe first. So in the addiction world, and I work, and I see people say, my life changed and this happened. Somewhere, somehow, someone made them feel safe and accepted. And then that gave them enough to be like, I can latch on to making a change and doing something different. Same with the 12-step world. They walk in and maybe they find spirituality, maybe they find God, maybe they find the people, but something helps them feel connection and a safety to be able to say, I can challenge myself. Right? So, but in the outside looking in from a societal view, you go, well, you need to just go do that thing. It's behavioral. There's a checklist that you have to do. And that's like, whoa.
How about you go inward first and then come back to me, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think that that's part of the stigma and shame that we have, right? Because it's just, there's a disconnect of what that means. Yeah.
Like I said, I've never thought of it before till this conversation. And this is why I love conversations like this, because all of a sudden you get these nuggets of truth that you never thought of before. And that's why I said, like, we expect people to deal with all of this. And yet we're often not willing to do it ourselves. And you talked about terrifying. I hate going inward still. And I've gone inward a number of times in my life. And every time it's still scary because it's something that I haven't delved into before.
Absolutely.
But I end up having more compassion for people in their process of doing that because I've done it myself or are doing it. I am doing it myself.
I love it because we were talking about the cornerstone to it being compassion. And then we've gone full circle into the idea of my capacity to be compassionate is reflective of my self-compassion. My ability to look inward allows me to have it outward. So what a great conversation, Jeremy. I mean, we're bringing things to an end here. A short amount of time. I would love to continue to talk about how that integrates, and I want to let the audience know that, you know, even though Jeremy said that there are some times where people have strict, rigid rules around religion, that spirituality is not that, and there's lots of organizations and people out there that have a spiritual construct or are Christian but do lots of really great work, and it's not about separation and pulling people apart. And you're one of those people, Jeremy. So I want to thank you very much for being on the show today.
It's been great.
Awesome. So thanks again, and God bless.
Love it.
All right. See you next time on Stirring Strength Perspectives on Mental Health.